Okay, welcome to GothCast, episode 13.
Yeah, today we're going to be talking about, yet again, The Cure.
Yeah, so this is part 3 of our discussions on The Cure's albums.
Yep.
So this time we're going to tackle Wish, Wild Mood Swings, Bloodflowers, and The Cure, the 2004 album.
Yep.
Yeah, so this is really where people say the Cure started to go downhill.
Yeah.
And so where many people stopped keeping up with them.
Which is funny, because ironically, this is where they receive the most critical attention.
Most people would include the first album that we're going to talk about, Wish. Most people would still include that in like the classic kind of Cure albums.
I do, myself personally.
Yeah, and it's really not until Wild Mood Swings that we see where most people say that this is the decline of the Cure for most people. But we're going to get to all that after this. All right, so Wish. So it's 1992.
Yep.
And Wish comes out, and it's definitely a departure, from Disintegration.
It is. It's funny. Wikipedia describes it as being a continuation of Disintegration, which I don't see at all. That being said, I have a lot of nostalgia for this album because this was the first Cure album I ever heard.
Yeah.
And this is what got me to want to listen to The Cure, and this was what got me listening to other Cure songs besides Friday, I'm in Love, and things like that. And I really do think that the first half of this album is really strong.
Yeah.
But I feel like it does take a little bit of a dip after Friday, I'm in Love.
I actually disagree with that. I actually think this album has a lot of good songs spaced throughout it. I will say that, yeah, there are some cuts that I just am not the biggest fan of, but I still think this is a pretty strong album for what it was going for.
No, I agree. For me, I feel like the first half is the strongest half of the album, and that doesn't mean that there aren't good songs on the second half of the album for me.
Yeah.
But for me, on the second half of the album, that's where I started noticing, like a song here or there where I'd be like, well, I don't know if I like that one as much, or if that should have made the cut for the album.
Okay. Yeah. So for this one, the first thing you notice right off the bat is, at least after this initial song Open, is...
What an interesting opening title.
Yeah, Open. But it is a slightly happier Cure.
It is.
What we got with Disintegration was, a very, like a combination of kind of albums like The Head on the Door and like the Gothic trilogy.
Yep.
With this one, there's less of the Gothic influence that immediately here, and much more of kind of like an alternative rock influence where it's kind of back to that pop formula.
It feels very much more straightforward post-punk kind of material.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure straightforward is the word, but definitely more pop-oriented post-punk.
Well, the thing I would compare it to is actually the Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, in that it's kind of like that album, but
it is
kind of more
like
of a 90s
album.
Influence.
Yeah, that's actually the album that this reminds me of the most from their career is Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me. But yeah, it definitely has a much more 90s production value to it. And you can hear it in the arrangements. And Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me has some darker moments on it than this album does.
It does. I think that the point of this album was to kind of distance it a little bit from Disintegration, because Disintegration was this big, gigantic, mopey epic.
Yep.
And that's what a lot of people loved.
And for Wish,
it's still kind of like mopey and kind of like insensibility, like when you actually look at the lyrics and you kind of actually listen to what he's saying. But in terms of like sonically and dynamically, it's like a much more major keyed album. So it's much happier sounding.
Pretty much going to see the majority of these songs written in major keys.
Yeah, so I mean, even the singles off this, so it's like Hi, Friday I'm in Love, A Letter to Elise, like those, they're very happy sounding songs. They are slowed down a bit, so they kind of have that kind of Cure sound to them, but it's definitely not what we were hearing just an album ago.
No, definitely not. It's definitely a new direction for them. But they do, again, still take some risks on this album.
Oh, absolutely.
It's definitely a weird song for them, but I kind of like Wendy Time, and it's definitely not a standard song for The Cure.
No, it's not. In fact, like the closest thing it gets for most of these songs is kind of like the guitar sound.
Yeah.
That's going to be the most common thing that you're going to see here is relating it to their other music. But it's just hard to say. Even like Doing the Unstuck, it's okay, but like I
wasn't a big fan of that song.
Yeah, exactly. But like songs like Apart and Open and Trust, they still really have a line to what they've been doing before, even like the pianos and the keyboards and stuff. Definitely. This is still a pretty heavy keyboard album, and the guitars are still jangly. In fact, the bass, it's a little less played in this one. Like I said, it's much more like alternative rock, so the guitars are pushed a lot more forward and the vocals.
You're going to hear the bass push back, which is less common for goth-oriented stuff. Usually, goth albums kind of have bass push forward.
Yeah, you still have Boris Williams. Like, it's basically the same lineup from Disintegration. Basically, the key players for it. So you still have Paul Thompson, Boris Williams, Simon Gallup, and Robert Smith. And that's like the most important people you can have for this. That's why it does have a similar sound to Disintegration.
This is kind of the last album that we're going to see that.
Exactly. So I guess we can talk about the most popular song on this album just to kind of get out of the way. And it's going to be Friday I'm in Love.
Yep. So this is a smash hit for The Cure.
Yeah.
And secures this album as their most successful album to date. This is their best-selling album.
Yeah.
Period.
Bar none.
Yep.
Yeah, it's crazy. This song is used in so many movies, in so many shows, in references. Like, people can just put, even people who aren't even in The Cure, they, if you're on social media and stuff, you see like the jokes of like the days of the week, and it shows like what's happening and like the lyrics of the song. So it just is like a part of pop culture. Like, it was so big.
Oh, definitely.
It's so hard to say, because a lot of people would say that this is where this is where The Cure sold out. This is where I couldn't listen to The Cure anymore because it's so different than their stuff. Honestly, I mean, we've been doing these episodes, well over an hour-long episodes talking about each of these albums. And after listening to their previous albums, I don't see this as much of a jump.
I don't either, really. And that's why I'm surprised that so many people will see this as a sellout album and that this receives so much bash from hardcore fans.
I don't get it, if you listen to a lot of the songs like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me, they're extremely poppy. They are,
Friday I'm in Love feels like it belongs on that album.
It really does.
Yeah.
And so I think people have this huge disconnect because probably a lot of people came in and started listening to The Cure at around, Disintegration, because that was so big, and that still is the goth album of today. Like, most people in the gothic subculture listen to that album like first over any other album, or maybe like Head on the Door or something. But or I guess pornography and stuff. Other than what seems way more obvious. But I guess in terms of like the most poppy ones, Disintegration will be the most accessible one for most people. And they probably listen to Wish thinking like, oh man, the next album, like, this is probably really good.
Yep.
And they say, oh, like, this is so much more poppy or anything. But probably not knowing that a few years ago they had done a ton of pop songs.
Yeah, and Disintegration was almost more of a departure from their sound than this album is.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. It just basically was moving more and more towards pop, and then
Disintegration came out of nowhere. And
it's basically the most accessible, poppiest songs about being really, really sad and depressed. And then Wish is basically the next album where it kind of reverted them back a little bit, but kept the kind of dynamics that Disintegration had.
Yeah.
So, I can see why people are pissed, and the videos don't do any help to this. So it's just, they look pretty happy. So so I think a lot of people were probably familiar with the image of Disintegration and Fascination Street and Lullaby and everything.
Yeah.
And they see Robert Smith with shorter hair and looking a lot happier and wearing white clothing and kind of getting up there and smiling while he's doing this stuff, and it probably turned a lot of people off and maybe just like instilled some rage in them.
Probably.
So
see the angry 90s goths rising up against this album.
Yeah, I could totally see that, because it was so successful too. Like, if anything is that successful, you're going to have a lot of people, especially fans who were in the band previously, who are going to just hate it.
Yeah. It's something I actually think about often, because we can look back at these albums objectively because we did not grow up as they came out. Mm-hmm. With the exception of these later albums. Yeah. These all pretty much came out before we were born. So we can listen back and listen to them as if it's all just being released to us now and listen to it as a collective whole. And you can really take an objective viewpoint of what these albums are like. Yeah. But I think about music artists now that we listen to, and I know oftentimes I get upset when a band departs from their sound on something. And I think about whether or not that's fair, because perhaps it's a good album and I'm just too close to it to tell. Yeah. And I think that may have been the case for this album.
Probably. The other single, at least the one I like the most. So the other singles were High, and then of course, A Letter to Elise. High again has a very extremely bright and happy video. Has like them singing on top of like a tower or something like that, and it's all bright and sunny. Again, I can see why a lot of people have an issue with it. And then, of course, A Letter to Elise. That is one of my favorite songs on this album. I know it's a single. I know it's not cool to pick the singles to like.
Oh, that's one of my favorite songs of this album.
It's so good. And it's been covered a million times by a ton of different bands.
Hey, I feel like you're allowed to like that as the favorite song because Friday I'm in Love is the main single.
Oh, good. Oh, thank goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like Friday I'm in Love is a little played out, obviously.
Yeah, unfortunately, it is a good song, but it gets so overplayed on the radio.
It does. Well, not even on the radio. I mean, it's in movies and stuff. You know, it'd be like, they're in love or the end, you know, like a cheesy romantic comedy or something like that. It's just like so annoying.
Every indie quirky movie has to like throw that song in there. With, you know.
Exactly. But other songs I like other than the singles, and I really like Open, the opener, and I also like End. So I like Open and End. And I think they're both really good songs. And I especially like End for the way it just progresses. I just really like it.
Yeah, Open and End, A Letter to Elise. I like Trust, and hey, I'm allowed to like Trust, okay?
Yeah, okay, sure. Yeah. I'll allow it.
And I just have a weird fascination with how strange Wendy Time is.
Oh, okay.
I keep listening to it, and I'm like, this is an interesting song.
I also really like Cut on this. And one thing I want to mention about these songs is they aren't necessarily the most, I'm trying to think of a way to put it. They're not like epics, you know, they don't change like a dramatic amount throughout the song, but they are extremely long.
They are.
So this is where we're getting like, basically the only songs that are under like 5 minutes on this album are the singles.
Yep.
Which is really funny because pretty much everything else is like 4 to 5 to 6 minutes long. I just think that's pretty funny that they're like, okay, you know, these are like the songs where we get to do this crazy stuff. Here are the singles. Like, and so you have like 3 of them.
Well, and here you kind of start to see that shift in the recording format for labels as music gets produced in the 90s and into the 2000s, where bands kind of stop making albums and then choosing singles, but instead they almost write singles for albums.
Yeah, that's true. You know, with the way this album's paced, you almost kind of feel that way. And it kind of sucks that I have to say that, but it does. It kind of sticks out that like you have these really kind of longer form songs with doing a lot more with guitars and definitely a lot more with lyrics, like in terms of kind of spacing them out or being a little more creative with them. And you have these 3 songs in here that are very straightforward, very poppy songs that clock in at under 4 minutes.
Yep.
So that, of course, is totally understandable and of the time, but yeah, it is noticeable. One thing I did want to talk about with this is the album art, because I know we always talk about it for The Cure.
Yep.
Never been a biggest fan of this particular album art.
Yeah, it's a weird one for them. Yeah. And in a weird way, it also kind of reminds me of Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me.
Oh, yeah, because the red and stuff.
Yep. But Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me was better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I don't know. I never really liked that scribble thing.
Yeah, I don't either.
So,
or that, whatever the hell that blue mass of dust and cloud stuff is in the middle. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, I don't know. And it's super 90s, you know.
Yeah.
Like, but that's kind of what this was. You know, this was released, you know, a year before this. Nirvana had really broken out and all the alternative rock stuff was coming in. And this is like, it's funny because this, like, a lot of people tend to associate The Cure with the 80s.
Yep.
And think that was like their time, but 92 is like their biggest thing. I mean, if you look at even videos from them, they're playing arenas right around this time, and they were big. They were headlining.
This is when they were the most successful. It may not have been when their best albums came out, but this was the peak of their commercial success.
Exactly. I'll put it this way. If you would have asked me about Wish probably like 2-3 years ago, right?
Yeah.
I would have said, you know, that's one of the better Cure albums. You know, that's definitely like one of the highlights of, you know, the top Cure albums. Maybe like I probably would have said like maybe like the Gothic Trilogy, and I probably like for their later albums I probably would have said like Disintegration, Wish, and I don't know, maybe like Bloodflowers or something. I don't know, something like out there, right?
Yeah.
After listening to all these really in depth having to do this podcast, I really have to say like I think this is actually one of the weaker albums.
It is, but I don't think it's nearly as weak as some of the stuff we're going to see to come.
No, I know. I was just saying that and for what's considered one of their best albums and what is their most commercially successful album,
it is surprising.
Yeah, because I think while we had some problems with The Head on the Door, right? And that's a little bit spotty in some of its composition.
Yeah.
Wish is not another top.
No. The top was a horrendous mistake.
Yeah, you listen to our previous episode if you want to. I think it's part 1.
There's one beautiful song on there.
No, it's not it's part 2 actually, I think. Yeah. But Top has its bigger issues. I felt like every other album other than Top and like Three Imaginary Boys was actually a stronger album than this one. This one, it kind of takes a lot of elements of what they'd already done and just kind of repackages it a little bit.
No, I'll agree with you on that. It's definitely not a bad album, but
no,
it's
not
bad
at all.
saying this, but I kind of feel like it's a little bit of a lazy album for them.
I can kind of agree with that.
Yeah.
Like I said, just because there is a lot of stuff that's already been done and is just kind of a combination of that stuff. It's not a bad album. It isn't in any way.
No, and I actually have a lot of love for this album just because it's my first Cure album ever.
I put it on too. Like,
yep.
If we're talking about this in terms of their whole catalog of albums, I do think it ended up being one of their kind of like mediocre album.
It doesn't stand out as being a terrible album. It's just kind of one that I feel like gets pushed to the wayside by much better albums.
Yeah. So I want to say this again with the idea that, if you love this album, and, I used to listen to the album like every day.
Yeah, me too.
But it is like, I just find myself nowadays listening to Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me over it because it reminds me of that. But I feel like Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me has much more energy.
I agree.
It's a lot stronger. You can just feel like the kind of passion they had in writing those songs, and they're a little bit more playful.
Yep.
Whereas this one, it does feel a little bit more like by the numbers for what they have been doing.
I would agree with that.
So, yeah, I get why it's successful. They had a formula. They really, really had refined it by this point.
They did.
And that's probably why it was so successful.
And you know what? They deserve to make, a little money.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I'm totally not against them earning the millions of dollars. In fact, I have nothing against them becoming big at this point. I don't think that takes away from the album at all.
No, I don't think so at all.
But I do think that like the songwriting was kind of streamlined by this point.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's Wish. You probably have heard it, but in case you haven't, go listen to it.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so this will be a new segment for this episode. And this is one that I think is really important to a lot of people.
Yeah, definitely.
And
this is a very timely topic.
Yeah, and so many people may not remember, but because I think it was a few years ago, I think it was about 2007 or 2008, there was a Gothic couple that was brutally attacked by a group of guys, and the girl was murdered. Her name was Sophie Lancaster, and they were just attacked because they were dressed goth.
Yeah.
And, I mean, it's brutal. I mean, absolutely ridiculously violent crime that was put against them. And I know we don't usually have like a lot of really somber things to talk about on here, but there's something that definitely needs to be addressed.
No, definitely. Unfortunately, because the Gothic subculture is one that is not as exposed as other subcultures, and one that's more feared because of social stigmas and things like that, and perhaps some of the androgyny that's involved in goth that makes some people uncomfortable, and definitely, just the way people dress in general scares a lot of people who are not used to it. And so when people are scared of things and they're not used to them, unfortunately, they do things that are heinous and sad and demented, and people get hurt. And it's really just a sad story.
Yeah. And so basically, I think it's in Manchester, they are classifying these kind of crimes, and it's verbal abuse all the way up to, obviously physical abuse.
Yep.
They're classifying it as a hate crime. So subculture hate crime.
Yeah, so that's really where the importance of that specific case comes up, is that this is now a hate crime officially to discriminate against a subculture. Because really, when you look at racism or any kind of discrimination, what it boils down to is prejudice and people just being uninformed and acting ridiculous and inhuman. And people who are part of subcultures get picked on all the time. And not just picked on, this is a perfect example of where they were killed.
Yeah. Well, it was, I think the boyfriend survived, but
yeah,
Sophie
the boyfriend survived, but still.
Yeah. They even released those photos of them in the hospital, and it was hard to even accept that was reality.
And that should just never happen. And unfortunately, like, there's going to be a lot of kids who go through high school who want to dress, goth, or, maybe some other subculture that's, dark and involves something that's kind of strange outside of the norm, and they're going to get beat up in school. And we're officially making this a hate crime, so
that's good.
It's a good thing. It's a good step forward.
I hope it definitely gets more accepted, as far as the United States goes.
I hope it transfers over here.
And so actually her mom, so Sophie Lancaster, I think she has a great quote, and like she talks about this. She's been lobbying for this forever. And so she says very often they are seen as the perpetrators rather than the victims because of the way that they look. And she talks about how the police force doesn't really take it very seriously because it's like, oh, well, just change your clothes or something like that. It's like, well, I mean,
why should they have to? That's like saying that, well, you could just stop being gay and people won't beat you up.
Yeah, it's what you feel comfortable being. It's what it's how you feel you should be.
Yeah.
And I mean, the whole gay thing is obviously a different subject because it's like gay genes and everything. Like, there's so much research on that. But I get what you're saying. Like, you could, if you were gay and they were like, oh, stop being gay, go kiss a woman. You could go kiss a woman. You could do it if it really came down to life or death. But, but you shouldn't have to feel that fear.
No one should have to feel that fear, regardless of any circumstance.
And I think that this is a perfect example of kind of making steps towards saying, like, well, hate doesn't come in skin colors. It doesn't come, I mean, obviously it does, but, it doesn't just come in these very defined packages,
Yep.
A lot of people, obviously, race is a huge issue, especially in America.
Yeah.
Where it's like, okay, you can't do anything about being black,
Yep.
But it's becoming a thing where, because we have opened our world up to all these different things, all these different subcultures, everything, it's like, and people just tend to look down upon them. The fact that we're starting to accept that these are real issues, where people are persecuted for a ton of different reasons that they wouldn't expect to be persecuted for being themselves or, being honest about who they are. And just because some a-hole can't accept that and is probably in, deep down wishes he could be like that, or wishes that he could be honest with himself, he feel like he's probably been repressed for some reason, lashes out at them. I think that this is a really, really great thing.
Yeah, I think it's a huge step forward in social liberty, and I would really like to see this law come to the United States. Unfortunately, I don't know that it will.
It's, I would say we tend to have a similar thing in terms of like bullying.
But as
far as adults, we don't really have a lot of these kind of things.
Not for adults.
I mean, bullying it's basically, I forget who said it, but there was basically one of the newscasters who was talking about how we pass laws in America, and it's always like, always protect the kids, always, because they're our future. And then as soon as they become adults, it's like, well, who cares? Yep. Like, it's like, oh, well, why didn't you do this? Yeah, like, you're not conforming to our society. Like, we shouldn't support you. We shouldn't help you. Like, it's all the stuff about that. And like, I think children's, like, that's absolutely like the great thing we should definitely live for is more benefits and helping kids learn more and educating and everything. But it is one of those things where in America we just get to adulthood and it's like, well, that's it. They don't even think about laws like that. So I would love to see something like that. Just something that could recognize that there are alternative subcultures out there. Not everyone has the crew cut and polo shirts on all the time. And if I want to live somewhere other than LA, like I want to not feel like I'm going to be stabbed.
Yep.
So by some crazy guy who's, has some idea. So it made me really happy, to see this. And that was such a tragic story. I remember when that happened. And it was so brutal. Like the brutality of that and just the pure hatred of that crime. I'm really glad that they are still realize that is a very serious thing. that is not acceptable.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, I hope that more laws like this are put in place in the future to further protect subcultures.
Yeah. Honestly, I just hope that, that too, obviously, but I just hope that it's taken seriously.
No, that I think so. Yeah, that's a huge concern is that there's probably going to be a lot of people who are like, oh, why are we wasting our tax dollars on this?
Exactly.
But people are going to be like, oh, like you said, they could just change their clothes. They could just dress differently. But that's the same thing as saying anything about anyone's lifestyle.
Yeah.
Because you're limiting someone's happiness because you're not comfortable with it.
Yeah, exactly. You're limiting somebody's comfort. And you could say that with religion. You could say that with, because it's a belief you have. You, this is something you really believe has merit. Yeah. And, obviously I'm not going to get into the whole religion debate about that, but, it's just saying that you don't have the right to be comfortable because it's not what somebody else wants. And a developed world, in developed countries, that's just not how we say we are. I'm sure that a lot of the kind of bullying and hate crimes that happen against these people, and a lot of adults, or especially young people in their 20s who are regularly go out and dress and are probably very active in a subculture, are discriminated against. And I feel like it's just very downplayed because it's just not taken very seriously.
Yeah, well, and I think it stops a lot of people from exploring these subcultures because, someone might be interested in it, but they know they're going to be shunned because of it.
Yeah, well, how many parents probably tried to stop their kids from dressing goth after the Sophie Lancaster murder?
Yep.
I mean, how many people...
how many parents have successfully kept their kids from dressing goth?
Yeah, I guess that's true. And then there was, of course, the West Memphis 3, who they kept on saying goth murder madness and everything, which was its whole own bag of worms. Yep. That is by the way, that isn't there a movie about that that's really good? I think I saw it 100 years ago. But yeah, it's just when these stories get more newer publicity and they have a resolution like this, I think it's great. Because, like I said, whenever these things come out, people are being attacked specifically for being a subculture, all the parent's going to do is try and make their kid look as normal as possible to not get picked on. Yep. Instead of addressing what the real issue is that there's somebody out there that is attacking people for looking different.
Yeah. Which at its root core is prejudice the same as all others.
Exactly. So that was our main news story of the week, and it was really important to me to mention that.
Yeah. We just felt that was a really important thing to bring up. And end on a slightly lighter note. Yeah. I saw Victor Frankenstein this week.
Yeah, how was that? We were talking about that earlier.
Yeah. So we mentioned this movie before. And I will say the trailer is very misleading for this movie. Yeah? Not a lot of one-liners in this movie.
Oh, man.
In fact, it's a very, very serious drama.
Wow, really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't expect that.
I didn't either. I went into it kind of expecting a Sherlock Holmesian kind of movie. It definitely did not fit that.
Weird.
Yeah. They almost cut the trailer to pull every single one-liner together just to make it look that way.
What? That's so dumb.
I completely agree. And I think it was to the movie's disadvantage because I will say this. I didn't think this was a particularly great movie. Uh-huh. There was a lot of problems with it. For one, again, we have another retelling of the Frankenstein story, which is, again, not true to the book, which everyone's going to complain about forever. But, just leave that aside, leave it at the door, because it's not even worth mentioning anymore. But at least Daniel Radcliffe's part in this movie, as he plays Igor, he's a very compelling character, and you really feel a lot of sympathy for him. Yeah. And I've watched, Daniel Radcliffe performances since, his role in Harry Potter has ended. Yeah. And I'm often overwhelmed by his Harry Potter persona. And I really forgot that he was Harry Potter when I was watching this movie. And I will say that's one thing that this movie does have going for it.
Is that it makes you forget that Daniel Radcliffe was Harry Potter.
Yep.
All right, you heard it from Robbie Gore. I mean, I might as well just put the tagline on the DVD cover for that. It makes you forget that Daniel Radcliffe was Harry Potter.
I just like seeing, when an actor can transcend his typecast.
Yeah.
And I really felt like he was able to do that in this movie. And unfortunately, it's an imperfect movie and it has a lot of flaws, but I enjoyed Daniel Radcliffe's performance in this.
Okay. So, Sophie Lancaster and Victor Frankenstein.
Yep.
So, okay. It's our new segment.
All right, we're going to be talking about Wild Mood Swings now.
What an appropriately named album for this type of music.
Yeah.
So
this is the album that marks the departure of many beloved members of this band.
Yeah. So we have Simon Gallup and Robert Smith are still in here.
They're pretty much the only like secured part of this band for this album.
And then we have Jason Cooper on drums and Roger O'Donnell's on keyboards now.
Yep.
And we also lost Paul Thompson. Yeah. So a lot of people will credit one of the things that lacks energy in their sound now is actually the switch to having Jason Cooper on drums. And
I kind of agree.
Yeah, where it just wasn't as tight of a drum sound.
Yeah, Boris Williams is just so good.
Yeah, I really agree with that. And, I've talked him up a lot. And whenever we discuss their older albums, I think he was awesome on drums. I think he was a perfect fit for their sound. I do think Jason Cooper, he just doesn't do it for me on this.
I don't think that he's a bad drummer, but I feel like he's kind of a weird fit for The Cure.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, of course, with Paul Thompson being gone, we definitely have a lack of guitar as, like, the main focus of the songs. And what you have is, you still have guitar solos, actually. And so when we talk about some of the songs, we'll talk about the...
Well, they have, Perry Beaumonte, who actually came out on the last album, who plays some guitars on this album, but he also spends a lot of time playing
a lot of
six-string bass and keyboards. And
yeah, so this album, I really am conflicted on it because there's definitely some good material on here.
That's exactly how I feel about this album. It pulled me in so many directions. Like, there's points where I really wanted to like it, and there's points where I was like, I don't know if I want to keep listening to this.
Yeah, This was okay. If you want to put a marker on where The Cure basically ended their streak of being like untouchable, this was definitely it.
Oh yeah.
A lot of people didn't think that The Cure could release, an album that wouldn't be at least successful as like a cult hit or wouldn't be, loved by the fans. Because even though Wish came out and it did have its lashback because it was so popular, it was still extremely loved by most fans.
Yeah, and well, I mean, as much as this does mark their decline, it still sat number 12 on the U.S. charts.
Yeah. But it definitely was, most people were confused by this one. And
I would agree, yeah.
I think it's definitely understandable. I'll just start talking about the songs because it's actually kind of hard to actually describe this album unless you're describing the sound of it, which is
vastly different from song to song.
Yeah, it goes all over the place. You have basically like ska and reggae influences, you have classical influences, you have jazz and orchestral things, and a whole bunch of different sounds on this album, and it literally goes from song to song. So it kind of fakes you out in the beginning. So Want kind of sounds like it could be a classic Cure song,
right?
And
that was my when that song came on, I was like, I don't know why people are talking so terribly about this album.
Yeah, right. Because it just sounds like a classic Cure song. I mean, it definitely has that sound. But then the next one, Club America.
Oh my God.
Has like this screeching guitar solo, and it's just
Robert Smith is attempting like baritone vocals, which do not suit him.
Yeah, exactly. It's just really weird. And it does have like the sitar thing that they were doing for like tons of songs, but it's all this stuff combined into one, and it just doesn't work.
Well, it is followed by "This Is a Lie." Maybe that's a little hidden agenda.
I see what they did there. It's just so weird. I don't even know how to describe how strange this stuff is, but when we get to the 13th, which
is probably my favorite song.
It's like the weirdest song.
I know it is. That's why I like it.
It has totally like a Hawaiian band sort of sound.
Really? I almost see it as more like a mariachi kind of.
Really? You see it as mariachi? I think of it more as like a calypso kind of influence thing. And I literally picture when I hear the song, you know how whenever it shows in movies, all the people in Hawaii like sitting at like the tiki restaurant?
Yep.
I literally picture like all of the Cure in like Hawaiian shirts up there playing that song on stage. And Robert Smith going, yeah. That's literally what I picture. And then, like Margaret and Bob at the table going, oh, honey, I like them. You should buy that CD.
I kind of like to see that happen.
I would love to see that. Oh, man, I would love that. Where it's like somebody's just at Hawaii. And
that should be the music video for this.
Oh, man. Well, they pretty much... It's funny you should say that because actually the single off this one, Mint Car, it actually has a video where he's dressed kind of like Las Vegas-y.
Yeah.
And he's like, by the way, the Mint Car, the single off this one, which was supposed to be like, the takeaway, it's basically like Friday I'm in Love, but more electric and more overtly happy. Literally the first line is, the sun is up, I'm so happy I could scream.
Yep.
There's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. And in the video, he is basically like throwing his arms out. He's like, there's nowhere else in the world I'd rather be. It's just this really, really crazy gestures showing like basically as a statement say like, we're not the same Cure we were. We're evolving into all this stuff. And it just doesn't work. A lot of people were just so confused.
Yeah, it's funny because that's supposed to be like the more Cure song on the album. Yet, I almost find their Stranger songs to be more interesting on this album, like the 13th, or personally, I have a strange attraction to the song Strange Attraction.
I see.
Not going to say that it's one of their best songs, but
as
far as this album goes, kept me interested.
Well, okay, I will actually say that about this album is, although it's kind of like a train wreck in its structure and stuff, like every single song is totally different. And it definitely doesn't seem to have any kind of direction.
Oh, no.
Other than that, hey, let's try
they let you know. Wild Mood Swings, this is a lie.
Yeah, exactly. Like those kind of songs, you want to listen to see like, what the heck are they going to come up with next?
Yeah, that's kind of what kept me going with this.
That's just one of the problems I had too, especially, with This Is a Lie, like that song could be really good, but it's so repetitive. Like it's so repetitive. It's 4.5 minutes long.
Yeah, I couldn't stand
This
Is a Lie.
And so it's just, like that's one of the big issues with this is that even the stuff that's really good, it just goes on and it isn't developed enough. They just were trying to develop more of this stuff. Like the other single, Gone, right?
Yep.
That one, it feels like a very developed song.
Yep.
Like they had a lot of time to kind of cut out the bits that didn't work.
Well, it's got an exclamation point.
Oh, okay. Sorry. I guess I didn't realize that, because it's gone, not gone.
Yeah.
But yeah, you have a lot of stuff that a lot of the fat could be cut, and the song times are slimmed down a lot on this album.
Yeah.
Instead of it being like 5 to 6 minutes on most of the stuff, it's about 4 to maybe 5, which still is pretty long for most songs. But you don't have a ton of that multi-part kind of stuff. What you hear in the beginning is probably what you're going to hear through most of the song.
Yeah. No, I'd agree. And, well, I think a major point to mention with this album is that so we have Gallup's departure for a period of time, and he's actually one of their key songwriters. He's often featured with co-writing credit on a lot of the songs with Robert Smith, and we don't have that as much for this album. So.
Yeah, he's technically credited with most of the songs, but you can definitely tell he's not as involved. Like,
no, he's definitely not as involved.
Yeah, there's so many keyboards on this album, and it definitely takes the place of the more guitar-driven songs.
Oh, definitely.
And a lot of the bass for this is... there's keyboard melodies, and I think that's why not only do they sound very different is because, you just change the setting on the keyboard and just have a different sound.
Yeah.
But I think it probably led them to do a lot more experimenting.
No, definitely. This does really feel like an album where they just kind of played around with things. And I kind of feel like, especially because Simon Gallup left for a period of time because of his health problems, they were just kind of trying to keep things afloat.
Yeah. If you don't have Paul Thompson either. So it's, So I'm not surprised that you move away from the instrument, but you have some stuff that does sound like what you would think The Cure would sound like. So Jupiter Crash, I would think a lot of people would associate with that. And the closing track, Bear.
Yep.
And even the song Treasure, I think, is close enough to that sound to where most people would say.
Agree.
Yeah. But then... you just have some weird stuff on here. In fact,
round and round.
Yeah, I was literally just gonna say that. So I don't know what they're thinking with this one, but it's literally just a song called "Round and Round and Round," and it just begins. It's like 2.5 minutes. It just goes round and round and round and round, and it's just doesn't make any sense to me why they would put that on the album.
Wild Mood Swings, man.
I guess so.
He wasn't taking his pills.
Yeah, and Numb's like a really sad kind of downtrodden sort of song, and
well, he wasn't treating his depression with LSD properly.
That's true. It's a lot different than their previous albums. But yeah, this album is basically it's really hard not to talk about each song on this album because they're all so different. You know, Strange Attraction, you have like sort of dancey song, and with Mint Car you kind of have like the single driven song.
Yep.
And with Gone you kind of have like a reggae sort of
I don't know
thing.
what to call Gone.
And so it's just really, really different what you have coming out of this album. It's all just packaged as this very strange collection of them. There's not really a cohesive sound of this. And you don't have to have an album to suffer for that, right? Even Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me has that since then, where there's a whole bunch of different kind of stuff.
Or Head on the Door is, very much like all over the place, like switching back and forth between genres and
so you can't have that, but I think that it just suffers as a whole.
There's no cohesiveness to this album.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like they were all worked on around the same time. It doesn't feel like the same people are on these songs.
Yep.
Lyrically, I feel a lot weaker than
definitely.
Yeah, than what they've been doing.
This doesn't feel like Robert Smith's lyrics to me. Like, I mean, I know it probably is. It just doesn't feel like the material I'm used to him writing.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, the instrumentation just wasn't up. In fact, if I could say anything about this one, it really makes you feel like it's almost like a Robert Smith solo album.
Yeah,
kind of. That one album where the artist does something totally different that's not like with the band's name on it.
Yep.
His vocals are pushed so far into this, like so far into the mix that you just feel like that's a centerpiece where they were like, okay, we have...
This is Robert Smith the band.
Yeah, we basically have like all these songs that need to be linked somehow, so let's push the vocal melodies really high.
Well, and it kind of was Robert Smith the band because they pretty much lost every founding member besides
Simon Gallup's on. Well, he's not a founding member. I mean, technically, yeah. So,
but Simon Gallup's part of the traditional lineup.
Yeah,
and they even they lose him for a while,
on the top, but then lose him on this one too.
Yeah.
So this album is just weird. It's something that when you hear like one or two songs off it, you're like, oh, I can't understand why people bash this one so much. But man, when you really sit down and listen to this one, it just doesn't stick with you the same way that the other albums do. It doesn't have a defined sound. It has an identity, sort of, in that it's trying to break out of the shell of what The Cure was known for.
Yep.
But it just doesn't do it as well. And that's really what the biggest issue with this one is that it's trying something and not really succeeding.
Yeah, I'll say, listening through this album in particular, I just remember thinking, this is a much easier album to listen to than perhaps a lot of other Cure albums. Mm-hmm. But I don't find myself enjoying it nearly as much.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And will I put maybe Gone onto a CD? Maybe like a mix of The Cure. I would definitely include... Was it the 13th?
Yep. That's definitely going to be on my mixes.
I definitely include that one, just because it's so weird. And I'll always picture Robert Smith wearing a Hawaiian shirt and singing to me when I'm at a tiki bar.
It just has like this bizarre appeal in the same way that Caterpillar had on top.
It's totally true.
Yep.
And unfortunately, the single doesn't. I really don't find myself thinking Mint Car is like a song I have to put on a lot. Like when I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, Mint Car is definitely not one of my favorite songs from this album.
No way. So that's all I have to say about Wild Mood Swings. It is just that. And they claim that it is, and it totally is. It's all over the place.
Yeah, it's an odd release for them. And I just find it odd because Robert Smith's been asked about this album before, and he says despite the fact that he knows it's not one of their most popular albums and that it's not like a lot of their other albums, that he really likes this album.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine with me. Okay, so now we're on to Bloodflowers.
Yep.
This is what a lot of people see as the return of The Cure to a more dark and sinister sound.
Yeah. In fact, Robert Smith coins this as the closing of his trilogy.
Yeah, where it says pornography, disintegration, and Bloodflowers.
Which I personally don't see, but
I can kind of see what he's going for.
I know what he's going for. I don't think it was successful.
Okay. I have a lot of mixed feelings on this album.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to say because I've met some people who love this album. I met some people who despise this album.
Yep.
And I'm actually kind of in the middle with this because I can see both sides. It's really hard to say. So coming from Wild Mood Swings, this is definitely a return to the classic Cure sound.
It is. It's definitely, they're going back to their darker sound and, moodier lyrics. And
But it just doesn't feel very strong.
It lacks something for me.
It lacks an energy for me. And that's what I find myself when I listen to this. It almost is a little boring.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that because lyrically this album is way stronger than Wild Mood Swings. Musically this album is a lot better than some of Wild Mood Swings. Yeah. I think it's like both a good return to their sound, but it's less creative.
It's more consistent in its
absolutely,
in its production and its arrangement. However, I feel like this album is just a little boring.
Yeah, unfortunately,
I have to agree with you.
Yeah, right off the bat, I just want to make it clear for this one that while this is definitely what most people see as a return to their sound and to what they have been doing, that they're the best at.
Yep.
It's almost so formulaic, and it almost lacks in energy.
I completely agree. Listening through this album, it's again, I would say another one of their very easy listens for me, at least. But it was such an easy listen that I found myself kind of spacing out and being like, "Oh, what track am I on again?"
Yeah, exactly. And that'll get to another problem that I'm going to talk about in a second. But let's talk about some of the songs that we really like or anything that we have comments on. So I want to say right off the bat, the title track on this, "Out of This World," is my favorite song on the album. Yeah. And I really, really like the way it sounds. I like the lyrics. I like pretty much everything about this song. And I like that it takes a while to build up and get going.
It is a good opening song. I will say, I think that's kind of one of the interesting features about these albums we're talking about today is they all seem to open pretty well. Like they have, they have a good opening song that kind of pulls you in, and then I'm not sure what happens.
Yeah, this is gonna bring up one of the biggest issues I have with this album is the repetitiveness.
Yep,
and the similarities of most of the songs to one another.
No, exactly. When I'm listening through this album, I really have to pay attention to the fact that the song changed because it almost feels like you could mix this as one giant Cure song.
Yeah. In fact, I really feel that the last day of summer, it actually really sounds like Out of This World.
Yep.
And so it actually confuses me sometimes when I'm listening to it because they sound so similar to me that I'm like, oh, was I repeating this one?
Yep.
It is so weird. But
I actually enjoyed There Is No If just because I felt like it was a little something different for the album.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that the song Bloodflowers is actually a pretty good song.
No, that's a good song.
I think it makes sense that they would name the album that.
Yeah.
Based off of this song because it's pretty strong on its own.
Yep.
I'm so conflicted about this one because it's almost like giving the fans exactly what they want, right?
Yeah.
You're getting a more straightforward Cure sound and you're getting that kind of ethereal, kind of stronger lyrics. You're getting this really guitar and keyboard oriented sound.
Yeah.
It just really is missing something, and it's so hard to put your finger on it unless you've listened to it.
Yeah, it's a strange album, and I will say this. I cut them some slack with these albums simply because they've been around so long at this point. When this album comes out, they're past the point where most bands should have died. But instead, they are coming into mainstream success at kind of the decline of their musical content. And so I feel like they're kind of at a weird place. They're receiving a lot of backlash from fans, but they're receiving praise from critics.
Yeah.
And so I feel like they're getting pulled in all these directions because there's the fame and there's the fans and they don't know what to do and they're trying to please everybody. And really, I feel like they should have just made albums for themselves in this time.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I don't feel like they did really.
Yeah, I can agree with that to some extent. I can see that they wouldn't have made this album sound this way if they didn't have to kind of show it to millions of fans.
Well, I just think about how many fans complained about the last album and just them being like, okay, well, we need to maybe return to some of our more gothic roots. And
yeah, and that also makes sense because most of Wild Mood Swings isn't even played after that tour for Wild Mood Swings. Like, I totally could have seen most bands continuing on that path of like making like, well, this album was successful, maybe we just need to try and make an album like, more in the direction of Wild Mood Swings.
Yep.
But they're one of the few bands who's like, okay, let's take a step back and go back to what we were doing before.
Yeah.
And it sure enough paid off. I mean, Bloodflowers is a very successful album.
Yeah.
And like I said, a lot of people love it.
A lot of people like it. They played that concert where they played the trilogy.
Oh, yeah, trilogy,
yeah.
But yeah, I do find a lot of fans who just are like, this just doesn't have a weight to it. And unfortunately, I agree with that. Even the most singly, if that's a word, type of song is Maybe Someday. I guess it's a good song.
Yeah.
It's a really good song. It is 5 minutes long. So, but it holds its own. And I think they probably spent a lot of time developing it. In fact, the shortest song on this album is There Is No If. It's a good song. Yeah, it's really acoustic guitars. In fact, a lot of acoustic guitars on this album. It just, I don't know what to say about it. It's hard to talk about an album that like isn't bad, but it's not super great. The songs for me tend to drag on way longer than they should.
Yeah.
And a lot of them just have very similar parts.
I have to agree with you. And unfortunately, I think one of the fatal moves you can make as a band is not to make an album that's bizarre or that's really different, but to make an album that's forgettable. And for me, this is kind of a forgettable album.
Yeah, I totally agree with that because this, it just is. Apart from Maybe Someday and Out of This World, I don't really, and maybe Bloodflowers, I don't really remember much of this album, even though I've heard it an insane amount of times.
Yep.
In fact, this was like the album I used to put on all the time when I went to work, because I just like the opening track. And so you just play that song and then you just listen to the rest of it, right?
It just kind of sounds like a continuation of it.
Yeah, and
it's good. It's good driving music.
It is good driving music, actually. It really is. But it just doesn't do it for me. And even in the mixing department, I feel like since Wish, we've been getting worse mixing.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. We get very 90s mixing, which I'm not a big fan.
With Wish, we had kind of that sort of sound because with Disintegration, it was much more like instrumentals with vocals.
Yeah.
Like, if you could say that. And when you get to Wish, you have the vocals in most songs pushed really, really, really far forward.
Yep.
Even if he's like whispering or something like that, it's just pushed way higher than anything else. So you kind of have the instruments taking the back seat to that.
Which is kind of a new thing for The Cure's mixing, because they've always been very evenly mixed as far as instruments and voice go.
Exactly. And so you always had like the pop of the song and less about kind of the catchy melody and more about what everything together is catchy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But then with, Wish, Wild Mood Swings, and it's like, I feel especially Bloodflowers, the vocals are pushed so far forward in Bloodflowers especially that it just like is overbearing. And a lot of times it's a really kind of dry mix. Like there's not a ton of like, what we've become accustomed to with The Cure.
Yeah.
It's a lot of like reverb heavy and kind of like maybe a little bit chorusy kind of effect on the voice. It's a very, very sparse treatment to his vocals, and it just...
It is. And even on songs I like There Is No If, it is a very dry kind of mix for that song.
Yeah. And I just find that it doesn't work as well for them. And a lot of people really like a lush, really layered Cure sound, and I am one of those people.
I definitely agree with you. It's just they've done so much material where they focus so much on what you can do with the studio. They take complete advantage of technology and being able to push sound to its limits, and that's kind of a lot of what Gothic music is about in general. And this album is very stripped away from that.
It totally is, and you could say that is beneficial to them musically, to not do the same kind of treatment to with the music.
Yeah.
But I just think it works better for their sound,
I would agree, especially if they're trying to return to a more Gothic kind of sound, which is from their interviews kind of sounds like that's what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
Why not use your traditional mixing?
Yeah, and I would say that actually a lot of classic bands start to do that as time goes on. Even when we did Bauhaus, Go Away White, same kind of thing, right?
Yep.
You have a very produced, very kind of unique sound with their earlier albums, and then when they did Go Away White, it's just right up in your face, and it's like and it just kind of sounds like a garage band sometimes, and that is really unfortunate. And I get it.
We should clarify, we don't mean the program.
Huh? Which one?
The Mac joke.
Oh yeah, it sounds like a garage. Yeah, it sounds like a garage band. Sounds like it was recorded with a garage band. But yeah, I just don't like that sound for them, unfortunately. So I think maybe if they produced this album differently, I might have been a little bit easier on it.
Yeah.
But as it is, there's just a lot of issues here, and I was a big fan of this album for a while. And I just am not. Like, it just doesn't keep my interest as much as anything else does. I don't find myself falling in love with this album multiple times like I do with a lot of the other stuff.
Yeah. For me personally, this was never an album that I really fell in love with ever. Mm-hmm. It was always just kind of an album that was like, okay, they put this out. I was like, and it's Cure-ish.
Yeah.
But do I really want to listen to this when there's so much other material?
Nope. Yeah. Oh, and by the way, the album cover for this one is really bad.
Yeah.
It just looks like a really bad Photoshop picture of Robert Smith.
Yeah, and the art for Wild Mood Swings is kind of bad too.
You know, I like it better than...
I like it better than this, I'll say that.
Yeah, there you go. All right, there you go. That's my point. So...
But we have some interesting album art choices from Wish Forward.
Yeah, exactly. Kind of differentiating itself.
Yep.
They've always had kind of strange album art, but this is where it starts to get to be like, okay.
Right?
So yeah, that's Bloodflowers. Give it a listen. See, I would like to hear somebody else's opinion on this, because I know that there are people out there who just love this album. So
I'd like to hear why.
Yeah, exactly. I would say just think about it outside of nostalgia, because if I just thought about this album from nostalgia, I would just be like, okay, this is a great album, like this is perfectly fine. And at the time, this is definitely what they probably should have been doing, is going back to their original sound.
Yeah.
If they weren't working with the other kind of genres that they were toying around with, I just think that they could have done it better. So
yep,
that's all I'd say on Bloodflowers. Okay, so now we're on to
The Cure.
Yeah, so
not the band, the album.
The album The Cure, by The Cure, released in 2004.
By The Cure.
By The Cure. So
for The Cure.
The reason this album is called The Cure, in fact, there's supposed to be a reason for it, because they were asked, why would you do a self-titled album
at the end of your career?
Not the end of your career, their 12th studio album.
There's only one album that really comes after this.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, 413 Dream, but yeah. So far we haven't gotten a new one.
Yeah.
Other than the one after this, but this was called The Cure because Robert Smith felt that it really described them and was like the quintessential Cure album.
He has a lot of interesting opinions, doesn't he?
Yeah. So one of the most important things to talk about with this album, and everyone has addressed it in the sound of this album, is the producer.
Yeah.
So Ross Robinson. And this is a producer who's very famous for producing the nu metal sound. So, yeah, bands like Korn, Vanilla Ice, when he was nu metal, I guess, Limp Bizkit, Slipknot,
yep,
Glassjaw,
the Blood Brothers, Repeater, Sepultura.
Yeah, Sepultura. Sorry, but
tomato.
A lot of people credit this album for kind of putting them into a new sound, like a new way of producing their albums. And a lot of people credit Ross Robinson for this, but apparently it was a nightmare working with him. I read a lot of interviews about this album when it was coming out, and
yeah,
Ross Robinson apparently would basically throw candles at them whenever they weren't like producing a sound they like, because they were like, he was saying like, oh, you guys
I like Ross Robinson.
he's telling like, you guys are all washed up, I used to love you guys, and like you guys can't play anymore. So he would literally throw candles, and he said he would throw candles at their vintage gear, and like it would splash everywhere. And
of course there'd be candles in the studio.
I know, right?
It's a gothic band.
Yeah. And he's like, yeah, I probably threw like 100 candles at them.
And of course there'd be 100 candles.
I know. And
well, this is also the first record that they release on Geffen.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Is it? Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, and apparently there was some sort of record deal that they had with Ross Robinson, but I don't think that they actually ended up following up with that.
Yeah, if you look at the label listing, it says I Am, and this is Geffen.
I could have sworn there was some contract where they were supposed to do more albums with him, but then I think for some reason they ended up not doing it.
It was supposed to be released with the I Am label. Is a 3-album deal.
I don't think that ever went through.
No, it didn't because they kind of hated him.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure the 413 Dream is not released on the I Am label. But
no, it wasn't.
Yeah, but then also he even just would apparently break down the band because he'd done this with tons of other artists where he would basically say somebody's writing a song about like
takes the Whiplash approach.
Yeah, basically, yeah. He would bring up like if there was issues. Apparently, when he's working with Korn or some band, he would say a song about like his father, and his father's like really abusive. He would basically want him to like relive it and basically break down crying and then sing the song. And with The Cure, he basically was like, screw you guys, you suck or whatever, and like
you're a bunch of wash-up hacks.
I think it was Roger O'Donnell's the keyboardist, and apparently like one point he even like started crying and was really emotional about it, and then he just was laughing at him like maniacally, and it's just this guy is just crazy. So it was a very, very different experience than what they've been doing. And that kind of stuff is crazy, and just what they came out of it with, I don't know if it was necessarily worth it.
I don't think so.
There are some benefits to this though. There are definitely some benefits to this album that I think it does better than Bloodflowers. And I know it's crazy to say because I know a lot of people just...
No, I would completely agree with you on that, actually.
Oh, you do? I'm surprised. I'm really surprised by that one.
Oh, I think in a weird way, this is kind of... How much is this not part of the canon? It's kind of, in a strange way, a better album than Bloodflowers.
I think in some ways it is. And I'm going to talk about why. And I think the biggest one is... the energy on this album is so much better.
Oh, yeah. Way present.
Yeah. Whereas Bloodflowers felt almost like phoned in some parts. Mm-hmm. Where it's like, okay, well, this is what this is supposed to sound like, you know, because we're The Cure. This one, because it is kind of departure from what they were doing, there's a lot less keyboards on this album. Yeah, like a ton.
It's much more rock band driven.
Yeah. And much more basic than what they've been doing. And it is okay in terms of lyrical content and everything like that. But I just really feel like this album is a lot more fun to listen to because they just feel like they're there.
I would agree. And as horrible as Ross Robinson must have been to work with, I'm sure he probably made them there, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And I think that it's a big benefit on this album is... just that they seem more excited about it.
Yeah.
And it does definitely call back to when they were making their earlier albums where they were more curious about their music and maybe it wasn't so formulaic and they didn't know exactly what was going to work.
Yeah, I definitely feel like this was an album that was much more made for them than it was for an audience or for a label or for...
Well, that's probably why they stuck around.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly. So... as far as songs from this album, I actually really like the opening track. I know that's probably a lot of people...
That seems to be like the universal like strand between these albums. They all have like great openings.
Yeah. This one, I could see a lot of people hating this one. It's just because it's really repetitive and just...
I could see a lot of people hating this album.
Oh, yeah. I guess that too.
But yeah, I have to agree with you. I like the opening song and I kind of enjoy listening to this album.
Yeah.
Just because it's... I don't know. It feels like they're alive.
Yeah. And also, of course, The End of the World is a great song. And actually, the video is awesome.
Yep.
And Alt End is totally cool, too.
Alt End is definitely a good song.
What a weird title, right?
Right?
I don't get it.
They couldn't have just written alternate ending.
Nope. I think that it's funny. The longer form stuff on this album, I don't think works as well. Just because...
definitely not. Well, because it's a much more direct approach to making music. Yeah. I don't feel like you can write like long songs with that straightforward of a, kind of guitar driven.
Yeah. Yes. It's really hard to say because this album definitely had a supremely different approach. And you could tell the vocals, like the vocal melodies and vocal lines are much more basic. In fact, oftentimes they just mimic the instrumentation.
Yep.
Like if the guitar goes da 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 da, his vocals will go if you want to.
Yep.
So it's definitely a different approach than what they were doing before, and I think it does kind of work and not work in some ways.
No, I will say I like this album personally a little more than Bloodflowers just because it kept my interest more.
Yeah.
And there are some things on this album that work and some things that I appreciate about this album. But I will say this is definitely not their strongest album. And one thing that I wanted to point out is that I really don't like the mixing on this album.
I hate the mixing on this album. In fact, the only song that I really like the mixing on is, I think, the opening track. I think it's just because I like the song. But other than that, everything is so...
Sounds like it was mixed by Ross Robinson.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's seems like it's been compressed and...
Everything's very compressed. Everything, the vocals and everything's very ornately spaced so that it I don't know. Every instrument weirdly feels like it sits apart from each other instead of blending, which I don't know.
I don't understand why they did it the way they did. And of course, because he probably thought the Cure's like a pop band, the vocals are insanely loud in the mix.
Yep. I hate how, if there's any album where that the vocals are pushed forward, it's this one. They're so far pushed forward.
Yeah, and it does, I think, actually affect how listenable this album is.
Yep.
There's definitely some good stuff on this record, but...
Yeah, again, and this is almost kind of like the inverse of what I was saying before. This is a almost less listenable album than the last few have been, but perhaps a more interesting one.
That is very confusing, but okay. I think I get it, but yeah, I don't know. It's just so hard because later in their career, these albums they're so conflicting to me because I just find that there's a lot of really good material hidden in these releases, but...
Yeah, I know. I almost kind of wish that they'd taken maybe a 5-year hiatus and taken these songs and sorted through the best of them and arranged them for a proper record. And
yeah, I would agree with that, actually, if it kind of be their big... huge return or something. But I mean, you gotta even think about it. There's 4 or 5 years between these albums, and it's understandable that it would take them so long to even produce something, and they wouldn't want to produce the same thing. This album, it's begging for something. And that Bloodflowers was begging for energy, for a burst of enthusiasm. This album is almost just begging for somebody who could mix properly.
Yeah, right.
And 2, it just is begging for...
I think a little more direction.
I think so. I think maybe just something that is a lifeline to what they were doing.
Yeah.
And because this is just really... as much as they're experimenting with their sound here, it just is very basic.
Yeah.
And not in the way that, say, 3 Imaginary Boards was basic. It's just that, again, the songs kind of sound similar. Just like Bloodflowers, they kind of blend together a little bit more. I don't think it's as severe as that album.
It's not.
Because I think there are definitely distinct songs in here. It just doesn't speak to me being this is a totally great return to form.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I feel like we should probably mention the album art for this.
The album art, which is literally children's scribbles.
Yeah, it's Robert Smith's niece and nephews who didn't know that their drawings were going to be used for this.
Yeah, I know. That's a really bad album art.
It's horrendous. It looks like his niece drew a picture of him hanging out with her or something, and then gave it to him.
Yeah,
and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to use this as the album art."
And he's joking, but then I was oh, how did it end up on there? But I've actually seen it was either this or Bloodflowers show up on worst album art by bands because there's always really bad album art by some band you never heard of, but it is things based on famous bands.
Yep.
And there was this, and Black Sabbath's was Born Again or something. It's a really, really bad album art.
Yeah,
it's the one with the little devil baby. And so I always just remember that. I was reading through it, oh, it's gonna be funny, bands I know. I was oh my gosh, The Cure's in here. Because it's literally scribbles.
Yep. This is probably one of their worst album covers ever, if not the...
I don't know, man. Bloodflowers, I think, is really bad, but this
is. But this is just bizarre and
not in the good way.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree. So all these albums have been very hard to talk about.
They have.
Wish was probably the easiest because it still is like a classic album.
No, it still is, and I still love to listen to Wish.
Yeah, and that definitely, I can see why a lot of people mark that as like the end of like the last album that was like the classic Cure albums. Like if you do from like, I mean, you can include 3 Imaginary Boys if you want, but like 17 Seconds to like Wish, right? That's what most people.
It's kind of what I consider.
And so, yeah, it just seems like a lot of the albums, and even when we talk about 413 Dream, I just feel like it's kind of experimenting with stuff and trying to do something different, but not really capturing that energy or excitement for music that some of the earlier albums had. Even Wild Mood Swings has a lot of energy. It seems like they're very excited to make that album, even though it is a very, very strange one.
No, and Robert Smith talks about how he loves Wild Mood Swings.
Yeah, and then I feel like when we get to Bloodflowers, it just kind of lacks enthusiasm.
Yeah.
And with The Cure, the album The Cure. Gosh, why did he call it subtitled like 12th album subtitled? I don't know. But with that one, I just feel like there is a kind of instilled enthusiasm in that album, but it just isn't as strong like in songwriting, and that's just kind of the issues that seem like every album that we've gotten after Wild Mood Swings, well, even after Wish, has its benefits and its drawbacks. Whereas, when we're doing Disintegration and a lot of the earlier albums, there weren't a ton of drawbacks. It was mostly like songs that were like kind of not liking that much, like it's like, okay, these songs that we don't like that much, the reason we don't like is because all these other songs are better. You know, with these ones, you're picking out the best songs. Yeah, you're like, these are the songs I like out of these songs that I think are okay.
Pretty much.
So, and I'm sorry if that sounds really harsh, but it really is just with.
I think we're just trying to be honest about these albums.
Yeah,
because unfortunately, they really don't hold up with the canon of The Cure.
Yeah, that's just really unfortunate. And like you said, if you were growing up with these ones, like if Bloodflowers was your first album, or if The Cure was your first album, I mean, a lot of people, if they're, I don't know, if they're teenagers or in their early 20s or something like that, it very well could have been their first Cure album.
Yeah.
It was The Cure. And that's not to detract from your love of this album, but yeah, we're trying to look at this objectively in terms of their whole career and
what they've accomplished. And
yeah, and these ones just don't seem to hold up as well. And that's really unfortunate.
It really is.
So that's The Cure Part 3.
Yeah, I think this has been the hardest Cure review to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because I have so much love for this band.
Yeah, and then you don't want to say these things about an artist that you really love, but I don't want to come on here and lie. We definitely could have come on here and just say, like, oh, Bloodflowers was a return to, like,
the trilogy.
Yeah, it was the trilogy. Yeah. It was completely everything I ever wanted. I definitely could have said that, because if I was talking about, like, Out of This World or something like that, that's a good song.
Yep.
And there's some good material on here, but it just doesn't hold up to me as much as any of their other albums before it. And
I completely agree.
So besides the top, and 3 Imaginary Boys.
Yeah, the top is just an anomaly of itself.
Yeah, that's a weird
3
one.
Imaginary Boys, like, it's weird, but it makes sense in the context of their lineage.
So, but yeah, so I'm glad that we didn't lie about it. I'm to appease people, but
yeah.
I still am very sorry, Robert Smith. We still love you very much.
We do. And I'm sorry to any of you who like these albums or grew up with these albums and these are your favorite albums, but we're just trying to be objective here.
Yeah. So this has been GothCast episode 13.
Yep. And just, again, always got to plug the social media. We got a Facebook, Instagram, both called GothCast. YouTube channel, GothCast Space Video. We have a website, gothcastradio.com, no www. And we have a Gmail account, gothcastradio@gmail.com. You can reach us at any of those mediums, and we're always happy to respond to questions or comments or requests, and we'd love to hear what you guys have to say.
Okay.
And subscribe if you can, because that would be awesome.
Yeah, and iTunes reviews, always love those.
Yeah, those are always nice.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Sanders.
I'm Robbie Gore.
All right, stay spooky.